Dana White has indicated that the UFC may be offering fighters health benefits soon. So there was an impromptu Q&A on Instagram, and one user asked, and I quote, "Will the UFC ever offer their fighters full-time health benefits so they could have them after their careers are over and possibly deal with life-altering issues from fighting?" To which White replied in one word, soon. Now, it's one of those things where on Reddit, this was posted and it blew up, and a lot of people are taking this as an indication that this will actually happen. But we know this is Dana White and we know this is the UFC, and sometimes that's, things are said and then not always follow through. We also don't know exactly what the healthcare benefits would entail. It's just White on a Q&A saying soon. So Drake, what do you make of this? Is this a indication that yes, they've been working on something and they're going to roll it out? Or is this kind of Dana just spur of the moment saying, yeah, we're getting to that and there's no real plan here?
Done deal, baby. Done deal. We can always trust Dana no matter what he says. No, no, definitely not. I think it's really funny. And we were talking about this before going on air here, how people are really kind of taking this and running with it, when to me it's just like, well, first of all, it's Dana, and then he only said one response word that doesn't indicate anything specific. Like soon is all right. Soon can be various times of length of times, right? Like that definition is very all over the place. So that's kind of funny. Surely we will hear this question asked to him in person next week at the very latest, for UFC 263 coming up here. But what this response by itself indicates to me is a couple of things that jump to mind. So first of all, just in this point in time in MMA history, still, we mentioned this a little bit recently, how the sport is still very young, especially compared to other sports. MMA is just kind of starting to hit. We're getting close to the 30-year mark, right? Like not even 30 years yet. So when you look at it this way, and just as time goes on and on, as people stick around for longer and older people go in and out, and you see the effects of what the sport did to them, we'll have more knowledge about how to assess fighter health, all that kind of thing, what the toll was. So over time, of course, is going to get looked into. Right out the gate, you could still do it, but at the time it's like, oh, do we need to do it yet? Of course, if they don't know that they probably should, without actually having evidence, then less likely, right? But now as time goes on and we're starting to get some sample sizes of time, and even specific cases where Spencer Fisher was one that was really brought up and highlighted by MMA Fighting Stephen Morocco, who did a fantastic, very, very in-depth piece about his situation. And that was even brought up to Dana in scrums and whatnot. So he's well aware of what's going on, not just from Spencer's side, but now, that's been highlighted a lot. So there's that. And then the fact that, I wouldn't necessarily call them a competitor by definition, but the BKFC recently, Dave Feldman, the president, saying that they're about to do that. I didn't hear if he said exactly when that's going to go into effect, but he adamantly said, yeah, we're about to do our retirement plan type healthcare thing or whatever. Obviously, you can be more specific with that, Pat, but they're going to be doing this now. So obviously, when you take kind of all these things into consideration, of course, Dana knows what other people are doing and people tell him. He's very in the know, I think, especially when it comes to these kind of things, whether he lets us know about it. So it's interesting that when it gets brought up, that he would say something now, which makes you think that, okay, maybe we could expect something. Will it be exactly the same, to try and prove that, all right, these other guys aren't going to be better than us in that area, or have some kind of point of controversy, I guess. But either way, I think it's an accumulation of a bunch of little factors that would even bring it to consideration for Dana. It's still obviously very hard to tell with just saying soon, but I guess we'll see. So I don't know, Pat, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's it's interesting because, even with David Feldman, as you brought up, right? He didn't explicitly say what the benefits would be. He talked about a pension plan more so,
Hmm.
right, to help with medical costs, but that's not the same as healthcare benefits. I
Right.
mean, we live in the US. So, for any of you that don't live in the US, healthcare is very expensive sometimes, and especially for fighters, right? Like, I would assume the best healthcare they could get would be on the marketplace, the healthcare.gov stuff, because through private insurance, they're not going to get it based on the risk that they have just based on occupation. So, it's one of those things where I could see them doing it, but only as a mitigation for something else, right? It's kind of that situation where, especially given where Endeavor is, given some of the things that I've talked about the past couple weeks in terms of the business side of things, where Endeavor desperately needs money. The UFC is basically making up 50% of their EBITDA right now, which is insane. So they need the UFC to be as profitable as possible until they can get everything reopened with the pandemic and make some more money through their other entities. And while I would love to see healthcare given out, that's a very high cost. I mean, it's a very high cost for employers in general. And with the UFC, I would imagine, again, if you're trying to do something like a group plan or through private insurance, your premiums and the rates you would have to pay just because of the occupational hazards would be astronomical. And so when you look at it that way, I mean, I really don't see a reason for the UFC to cut so much out of their bottom line unless it's mitigating against possible lawsuits. You could argue the antitrust. I've seen that floated around, but really that would only, if they offered them health insurance, that would only help the fighters who are saying that they're employees, right? Like, if they're
Hmm.
trying to say, hey, they have monopoly power and we should be treated like employees, not contractors. If the UFC gives them health insurance, then that definitely points towards employees. So that
Right.
hurts that case. So I really don't think that's going to happen. I could see a fund set up or something, right? Where it's like, if you're retired and you put in so many years with the company, you have kind of a pension fund. And that's what Dave Feldman talked about, where you had so much money aside and then you can use that as you see fit, but it would probably generally go to medical expenses. That makes more sense. But I can't imagine it'll be anytime soon, just because of the financial situation of Endeavor right now. If they do that, that's a huge undertaking. Pension plans are a bottomless money pit, especially as technology gets better and better to keep people alive longer. I mean, that's why the pension plans of old from companies like IBM and AT&T all basically got liquidated, and they had to switch over to 401ks, and they had to pay out a lot of that because they would have literally bankrupted the company or was too much of a drain. You have cities and states all over the country right now who have pension plans for their teachers and for state, employees and all that, who are facing huge fiscal issues because the pension plan takes up so much of their annual spending and their long-term spending, and it just keeps growing because people are living longer. So I think it's one of those situations where I don't really see this happening at least anytime soon. Maybe in 2 to 3 years,
What he said.
but they did say soon, right? Yeah, I mean, good counter argument there. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, I mean, valid point. He did
But
say
I'm
soon. It was his official account. Do we know it was him? Yeah, it probably was him on Instagram, right? Like, and not an intern. But I mean, yeah, I just don't see it, man. It doesn't make sense to me.
So, with that in mind, what do you think could possibly be the bare minimum, like lame ass thing he could roll out? Is like, get ready for this, you guys. And it's just like, you know, plant, total fart of a thing. What would that be? Is that possible even?
Oh, it's possible. I mean, I think that's what Feldman talked about.
Right.
It's you roll out a pension plan, but you roll it out at like Reebok compliance level
Right.
stuff. Like if you if you fought like what 20 fights in the UFC, you get 10 grand a year or 10 grand, something ridiculous. And if you're Andre Arlovsky, you get 40 grand a year, and it's enough to help. But I mean something like that. I don't know, or something based on fights, something of that nature, something that would be in the grand scheme of things lower cost right now. And especially if you had kind of a vested period where you had to fight so many times in the UFC to even be eligible and all that stuff, and you keep that number overall low, something that's kind of a drop in the bucket but gives goodwill, that is totally feasible.
It incentivizes you to fight more.
Exactly. You sure you don't want to sign that 5-fight contract extension now that you're ranked number 10? Because you will, if you make it those 5 fights and we don't cut you, get 10 grand a year for the rest of your life.
That seems right now, like, to me, that seems probably like the most realistic thing. If I had to predict, that actually sounds pretty good. Because it's like, how many fucking people right now have over 20 fights in the UFC, right? Like a small handful.
Yeah, and most of them are company men anyway, right? Like you think of Cerrone, Jim Miller, Arlovsky, guys that have been there forever that that are willing to step in for short notice fights in the company likes anyway. Probably would give them money anyway. So yeah, I mean it's a fiscal problem on the business side. That's the only thing I can see. And you'd have to buy a lot of goodwill. It would have to do something, whether that's like mitigating. The only thing I can see is mitigating lawsuits. If there's no threat of that, then it's still too early based on where Endeavor's at. If Endeavor comes back, this year, especially the second half of this year, ends up being much more profitable for them, and early next year things are going well, then go ahead and do it. You're not relying on the UFC so much. But otherwise, it's just no, it doesn't make sense. Not right now. So,
well, good thing you said just soon then.
Yeah, soon. So let us know what you think of this whole situation. Do you think the UFC will actually follow through with this and give healthcare benefits? Do you think it will be something more like a pension plan that Dave Feldman has talked about, although we still don't have details on that? And he said we would have them in a couple weeks back in April. Been a couple months, but
he said it on April Fool's Day, actually.
Yeah, there you go. No, I don't think he'd joke about that, but we'll see. We haven't seen anything yet. But let us know what you think about all those situations surrounding fighters' healthcare. If you haven't read the Spencer Fisher article, highly recommend you go do that as well, because that's some great insight. Make sure you hit the like, subscribe, bell notification buttons so you know you're always here when we're going to drop some great knowledge on you like we are right now. And yeah, man, to wrap this one up, I'm just going to say that the American healthcare system sucks. That's it.